I arrived at my son's office with a bouquet of flowers in hand. Before I could even smile, he pointed at me and told the guard loud and clear, "Don't let him in. He's just a poor man." Laughter, whispers. Even the receptionist looked away. He had never spoken to me like this before, so why now? What they didn't know was the envelope tucked inside my coat, my name, my shares, my legacy, all erased in one sentence. Who warned him I was coming? What was he hiding upstairs? And how long had they planned to erase me from my own company? The petals scattered across the tile floor like someone had stomped on a memory. A single red rose twisted under the guard's black boot, its stem now broken. I didn't speak. I just watched, holding on to what little dignity I had left. People passed me in the lobby, pretending not to see. My face once hung beside the company logo near reception. Now even the security scanner blinked red when I stepped near. The guard didn't say anything at first, just folded his arms, stared ahead like I was invisible. Then, as if the words needed to be reheated, he muttered, "Sir, I'll have to ask you to leave." "I founded this place," I said. Voice low, no anger, just disbelief. "Those were your words, not his." The guard nodded toward the elevator. The doors had just closed behind my son and his new assistant, a young man who couldn't have been older than 30. They were laughing. Not even a glance back. I picked up the crumpled bouquet, its paper soaked where it touched the dirty floor. One rose had lost all its petals. I stood for a moment, unsure whether to walk out or throw the flowers at the wall. My fingers tightened around the stems instead. The receptionist glanced at me, guilt flickering in her eyes before sliding a small envelope across the marble counter. "He said to return this. Said you'd understand." I stared at the envelope. My handwriting, my seal. It was the same one I had tucked into my coat 2 days ago, containing the original draft of the mentorship transition letter. I had planned to present it today, to formally hand over the company to my son. My shares, my voice on the board. My name. Did he read it? I asked her. She hesitated, then lied. He didn't have time. The lobby lights hummed louder than the people around me. Everyone kept moving. Co-workers, clients, interns with coffees in hand. But none of them made eye contact. The founder of the building was just another man with old flowers and shaking hands. A janitor passed with his mop and paused near me. He looked up, then whispered, "You used to run this floor. Every Friday you'd walk in with your jacket off and sleeves rolled up." I remember that. I smiled faintly. "You remember more than my own son." He gave a nod of respect, then kept mopping. His kindness almost broke me more than the insult. I sat down on the cold leather bench near the lobby window. Watched the rain begin outside, slow drops crawling down the glass like tears that didn't belong to anyone. Across from me, a young man in a tailored suit whispered to his colleague, "That's his dad, right?" I thought he was dead. Dead. That's what they made me, without a casket, without a ceremony. The flowers wilted in my hands. I opened the envelope slowly, expecting to see the letter I wrote. But inside was something else, a printout. I unfolded it and froze. It was a board memo, not addressed to me, not copied to me. Subject, Founder Legacy Archive, complete removal by Q4. They weren't just moving me aside. They were erasing me. The memo included steps: remove name from press materials, rebrand the Founders Lounge, delete welcome letter from the founder from onboarding packets. They were even planning to rename the scholarship fund that bore my wife's name, and at the bottom, signature Ethan J. Henderson, CEO, my son. My blood. I held the paper tighter than the bouquet now, hands trembling but no longer from age. This time, from the kind of betrayal that stabs without blade. They thought I wouldn't find out, but I had another envelope still in my coat, untouched. The one with the original shareholder contract. The real one. The one with my control clause. They'd acted too fast. The rain outside thickened. A car pulled up, black SUV. My son stepped out again, shaking hands with a potential investor. I stayed seated, watched as he gestured toward the building, all smiles. His gaze never met mine. He knew I was still there. He just didn't care. I stood up, slid the memo back into the envelope, and walked out the revolving door, but not before glancing once more at the plaque inside. Founded 1992, James Henderson. I wasn't going to let them melt that name off without a war. My son's voice echoed through the phone. "Don't come back again." The message came in just as I stepped into my living room, rain still dripping from my coat sleeves. A missed call notification blinked twice before the voicemail began to play on speaker. "Dad, listen, I need you to stop showing up at the office. It's uncomfortable for everyone. Don't come back again, okay? Let's talk when things settle." There was no anger in his tone, just cold efficiency, like firing an intern he barely knew. The same voice he used to call me Pops as a child now sliced me down in a single breath. I stood still, my coat soaked, drops of water pooling beneath my shoes. The flowers lay on the counter, petals curling at the edges like they were ashamed to be seen. Then came the knock. Not a visitor. Not a friend. It was her. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway, hair pulled back tight, black umbrella dripping onto my welcome mat. In one hand she held my spare house keys. In the other, a zippered envelope with the company logo. "Ethan sent me," she said, stepping inside without asking. "I didn't invite you. You don't have to." "This isn't about invitation. It's about boundaries." I stared at her. "Whose boundaries? Mine or yours?" She placed the keys on the table with a loud clink. "You need to let go, James. This isn't your company anymore. It's not your future. You showing up like that? It's pathetic." Her words hit harder than the voicemail. Maybe because she said them to my face. "I came with flowers," I said. "Not a lawsuit, exactly. You came with sentiment. We're building something bigger now, cleaner. You don't fit in anymore." The envelope she carried made a soft sliding sound as she pushed it across the table. "What's this?" "A courtesy. Your official removal documents. HR will mark it as a voluntary departure to protect your legacy. If you don't sign, well, we'll have to go public with some uncomfortable records." She smiled, soft and polished like a lawyer who's done this before. "What uncomfortable records?" I asked, voice low. "You remember that investment deal from 2010? There were some loose ends. Ethan's lawyer could spin it in ways that, let's just say, don't flatter you. Are you threatening me in my own house?" She took a step back. "I'm giving you dignity. One last chance to leave without scandal. Sign the envelope, walk away. Be remembered fondly. And if I don't," she tilted her head, "then you'll be remembered. Just not fondly." I didn't touch the envelope. Didn't touch the keys. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye. "You rehearsed that, didn't you?" She blinked. That whole speech, the threat, the false concern. "You've been waiting to say it." The front door creaked open again, and this time it wasn't her doing. My neighbor Phil stood outside. He froze when he saw her. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt." "You did," she said. He ignored her, looked at me. "James, you all right?" I nodded. "Why?" Heard raised voices. "Thought I'd check in. Town's been talking. Some folks at the diner said your name's off the company website. That true?" I didn't answer. Daughter-in-law stepped forward, all smiles. "Oh, we're just sorting through some old paperwork." "No big deal." Phil didn't buy it. His eyes flicked to the keys on the table. "The envelope. You okay, buddy?" I nodded again, but this time slower. Phil didn't leave. Neither did she. The silence turned heavy. Then Phil said something that shifted the whole balance. "You know, James gave my nephew his first job when no one else would. Ran this company like a family. Not like a, what do you people call it? A merger." Her smile cracked just enough to show the woman behind the performance. "I'll be leaving now," she said, gathering her bag. "No," I said. "Leave the envelope." She hesitated, then tossed it back onto the table like it was worthless. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Oh, you're going to make this difficult, aren't you?" I smiled. "I've already made it impossible." Phil stayed a moment longer after she left. Then he said quietly, "You should come to the bank with me tomorrow, James. Something happened last week, and I think you need to see it." The bank manager avoided my eyes as he printed the statement. The next morning, I wore the same coat from yesterday, the petals from the crushed bouquet still stuck to the inside pocket, like dried confetti from a funeral. I didn't remove them. I wanted to remember exactly what had been stepped on. Phil drove us to the bank, no words, just quiet music humming from the radio and his knuckles tight on the steering wheel. We entered through the side, where the business account managers usually walked their high-end clients. Not retirees, not discarded founders, but Phil worked here once, still had strings. A young man behind the desk looked up. "Phil, didn't expect to see you here on a Saturday." Phil smiled. "This is James Henderson. He needs to speak with someone from senior account management. Privately. The man's smile faltered when he heard my name. Let me get Mr. Goldman. 5 minutes later, David Goldman appeared, salt and pepper hair, three-piece suit, and a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Henderson, he said cautiously, offering his hand, I didn't know you'd be coming in today. I didn't know my son had full access to my private accounts either, I said. That wiped the smile off his face. We entered his office, blinds drawn, door locked. David moved slower than usual, like he was measuring every step of what this meeting might cost him. I'll be direct, I said. I want full transaction history of both business and personal holdings. All accounts linked to my name. Joint or otherwise, he hesitated. That's a lot of files. You have my signature. Do you have my ID, or has that been revoked too? No, he said quickly. Of course not. He typed on his keyboard, fast at first, then slower still. The printer behind him began to whir. Pages slid out like whispers from a buried secret. Handed them to me without a word. I flipped through the first few pages, and my breath caught in my throat. Transfer after transfer. Thousands, then tens of thousands, gone, disappearing, like sand through a hole I never knew existed. Who approved these? I asked. David licked his lips. They were digitally authorized. I don't use digital authorization. You know that, I know. But the credentials matched. Your signature's on file, sir. He turned his monitor around, on screen. A signed form authorizing Ethan J. Henderson for unlimited transfers on joint assets. My signature glowed at the bottom. That's not mine, I said. He nodded slowly. It looks like yours, but it's not. I looked at Phil. His jaw had tensed. David leaned in. Ethan came here last week with his wife and a lawyer. Said you'd authorized it. They had the papers. And the charm. Charm doesn't transfer legal control, I snapped. No, but perception does. And if you don't fight it within 30 days, it becomes binding. I dropped the paper onto the table like it burned. My name was there, but not mine. My signature, but not my hand. I had been erased financially. I flipped to the last page. My pension transfer was missing. Monthly deposits had stopped. When was the last deposit? David checked. 3 months ago. I never received a notice. They must have redirected it through new credentials. He hesitated. There's more. He handed me a separate envelope. Inside was a formal change of beneficiary form for my life insurance. Original beneficiary. James Henderson. New beneficiary. Madison Grace, my daughter-in-law. I sat back, heart thudding, not with fear. With calculation. They hadn't just removed me. They were building a replacement. A dynasty of lies. David cleared his throat. I'm sorry. I truly am. But if you want to reverse this, I need a lawyer, I finished. He nodded. And a notary, I added. David's eyes met mine. You still have one thing they don't. What's that? He glanced at the envelope I hadn't yet opened, the one I carried yesterday to my son's office. The original shareholder agreement. I remember it. The clause about voting control. No one can touch that if you file in time. Phil reached over, placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not out, James, not yet. I took the papers, stood up and nodded to David. You've known me for 25 years, I said. Now you'll see who I am when someone touches what's mine. Outside the bank, as we stepped into the light, Phil turned to me and said, You still have your old assistant's number? Because I know a guy who owes you a favor, and he has a courtroom badge. Mr. Henderson, you're no longer listed as a board advisor. The lobby of the State Records building smelled like dust, paper, and forgotten promises. I'd walked these halls a decade ago when I filed the first articles of incorporation for my company. My name in bold, stamped in ink. Now I walked those same halls, invisible. Behind the counter sat a young clerk in glasses, tapping his keyboard while sipping on a plastic cup of gas station coffee. He barely looked up when I handed him my ID. I'm looking for company filings. Henderson Strategic Holdings. Current board list. Charter updates. Anything recent? He nodded, bored. 1 second. The seconds turned into minutes. His eyes blinked in confusion. Sir, are you sure you're currently affiliated? I leaned forward. I founded the company. You'll see my name. Look under the original documents. He checked something else, clicked a few keys, frowned. Mr. Henderson, you're no longer listed as a board advisor. No chair, no signature rights. According to these filings, you haven't held authority for nearly 9 months. My heart didn't skip, it slammed against my ribs. Let me see the amendment filings, I said. He handed them over. Stapled, stamped, neat. My name was gone from every section. Chair, Ethan J. Henderson, Legal Counsel. Madison Grace, Founder. Archived under Legacy Clause, Legacy Clause. They'd buried me in a footnote. I took the packet and walked outside, hands shaking but my face frozen calm. On the stone steps, I sat under a statue of a blindfolded lady holding justice in one hand and a sword in the other. For years, I believed that sword was mine. Now it pointed back at me. I pulled out my phone, heart racing. I called Diana, my old assistant, sharp, loyal, still had the spine of a woman who'd worked under fire and never blinked. She picked up on the second ring. Mr. Henderson? Her voice alone almost broke me. I need your help. An hour later, I met Diana in the parking lot behind her new office. She handed me a manila folder before even saying hello. I heard what they did, she said. I tried to warn you. They blocked me before I could. Warn me about what? She looked around, then opened the folder. Photos, screenshots, emails. My company's rebranding project had started 6 months ago. Not just logos and new mission statements, but identity-level cleansing. They removed my founder's welcome letter from all hiring materials, eliminated the scholarship fund in my wife's name, and even edited photos from the corporate archives. One image used in the new campaign. My son standing in front of a model office with the caption, "Our vision begins with me." My face blurred in the background. They photoshopped me out, I whispered. Diana nodded. And look at this. She pulled out an internal memo. Subject our Q4 brand cleanse, Phase 2. Remove all James Henderson references from website. Dissolve founders. Lounge nameplate. Eliminate legacy benefits tied to old leadership. Implement Ethan H. as solo spokesperson for investor calls beneath it. A note scribbled in pen. Dad won't know until it's done. Don't leak anything until he signs the surrender letter. I stared at that. Plain Dad won't know, not James, not the founder. Dad, he still called me. That even when planning my execution, I looked at Diana. Why are you helping me? I asked, her face hardened. Because I remember who built that company. And I remember the day you cried in your office, holding your wife's photo after she passed, and you still showed up for work the next morning like a soldier. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She leaned in, whispering, "You didn't lose everything. I backed up some files before they deleted your access." "What kind of files?" "Proof of contribution, founding documents, voting clause from the original shareholder agreement. Ethan doesn't know it still exists. You still have legal leverage if you move fast." Symbolic object tucked inside the folder beneath the emails was the last printed version of my founder's lounge plaque photo. My name still visible, my smile still proud. I folded it and slipped it into my coat beside the crushed bouquet receipt. I dropped Diana off and drove home. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't broken. I was calculating. They thought they had deleted me, but they'd only deleted the version of me that smiled and said nothing. This new version remembered everything. That night I opened the safe behind my old bookshelf. Inside, dusty but untouched, was the original shareholder agreement signed and sealed. The clause was still there. One sentence. Founder retains right to reclaim executive power with 51% vote in breach of moral ethics. The church deacon pulled me aside, whispering, "They say you're losing it. Sunday mornings used to be sacred. The pews smelled like cedar and candle wax, and every hymn reminded me of my wife's humming beside me." Her absence echoed louder than the choir now. This Sunday felt different, thicker, like the air was holding its breath. As I stepped into the church foyer, heads turned. Not toward the altar, but toward me. Their eyes didn't hold warmth, just pity, just suspicion. I hadn't even made it past the bulletin board before Deacon Rob pulled me aside. "James," he said, voice low. "Can I have a word?" I nodded. He looked over both shoulders before speaking. "They say you're not well, that you're confused lately, forgetting things. Someone said you showed up at Ethan's office last week uninvited and caused a scene." I stared at him, jaw stiff. "That's what they're saying?" I don't believe it. But when whispers become sermons, people start listening. I looked past him to see Madison seated with Ethan in the front pew. Her lips moved in polite conversation with the pastor's wife. Ethan didn't look back at me, not once. The whispers weren't accidental, they were engineered. The choir began. I sat 2 rows behind them, heart pounding harder than the drums. Then, during announcements, Pastor Grant stepped up and said, "We have a moment of gratitude today. The Henderson family has generously pledged a new scholarship fund to replace the retired Founders Grant." Froze. The Founders Grant, named after my wife. The program I built from her memorial savings. Let's thank Ethan and Madison for leading this new chapter. Applause. Nods. Madison glanced back, straight at me and smiled. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's when the usher tapped my shoulder. "You're James Henderson?" "I am." He handed me a white envelope and walked away without a word. I opened it slowly. Inside, a formal notice, petition for transfer of financial guardianship and cognitive evaluation, filed by Ethan Henderson and Madison Grace. Attached, affidavits, claiming mental decline, erratic behavior, and social deterioration. My hands trembled. They were trying to legally remove my authority, using my age as the weapon. I stood up, the envelope still in hand. I walked straight down the aisle. Heads turned. Whispering grew. Pastor Grant paused mid-sentence. "James, is everything—" "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said. "But if you're going to announce the death of something I built, I deserve a chance to say a few last words." I walked up to the pulpit, document in one hand, old Founder's plaque photo in the other. People stared. Madison looked uncomfortable now. "Daddy, good. This church once honored legacy," I began. "Today it applauds its erasure." A few people gasped. Others stiffened. I held up the notice. "This," I shook the paper, "is what betrayal looks like when it hides behind legal ink. My son and his wife are filing for guardianship over me. Not because I'm confused, but because I'm inconvenient." I turned to Ethan. "You used your mother's name to raise your public profile. Then you used my signature to wipe my name from our company." Silence. Tight, heavy, unbreakable. Until someone coughed. Then someone else stood up. "Phil." "From the bank. I saw the documents," he said aloud. "James isn't lying." The room shifted. Like ice cracking beneath a frozen lake, I continued. "They want to control my finances. Say I'm unwell. That I forget things." I looked down, then back up. "I haven't forgotten a damn thing. Not the day we broke ground on our first office. Not the night my wife died in my arms. Not the birthday Ethan skipped because of a golf retreat." A murmur ran through the pews. I pulled out the photo. This was the Founders Lounge plaque. "You've probably never seen it because they took it down." I held it up. They took me down with it. As I stepped down from the pulpit, Pastor Grant didn't stop me. Madison whispered something to Ethan, her face pale. And then someone from the back stood and said, "If this is true, there's more we need to hear. Please hold while we process your cancellation request." Monday morning arrived like a switchblade in my chest, sharp, cold, necessary. I sat at my kitchen table, flanked by 2 things, the document they tried to use to strip my control, and the folder I still had that could undo it all. In between them sat a cup of black coffee, no sugar. Just like I used to drink during strategy calls, when Ethan was still learning how to tie a Windsor knot. This time, I didn't need a boardroom. I needed a phone. I started with the pension office. A young rep picked up. "Good morning. State Benefits Division. How can I assist?" "This is James Henderson. I need to suspend all distributions immediately. Permanently, if possible." "Suspension of pension distributions?" "For yourself, sir." "Yes, myself. I'm cutting off access because someone else has been using them." She hesitated. "That requires identity verification, and I'm faxing a notarized letter now. You'll have it within 10 minutes. I've already made the appointment." My voice was sharper than usual, clipped, focused. "I also want digital access disabled. No online withdrawals. No third-party transactions. Full manual control only." "Understood. Please hold while we process your cancellation request." The line clicked to hold music. A violin cover of Lean on Me. I almost laughed. While I waited, I pulled the crumpled flower receipt from my coat pocket. The ink was fading now. A half-torn sticker still clung to the corner. I flipped it over and scribbled a name, Madison Grace below it. I drew a dollar sign with a line through it. The music stopped. Mr. Henderson, your cancellation is confirmed. A hold has been placed on all benefit deposits. Digital access locked. Manual verification only. Good, I said. Now connect me to the insurance department. An hour later, I sat in front of Mrs. Salazar, my old insurance agent, retired, but still loyal. James, she said, raising an eyebrow, you never come in unless you're changing your will. I slid the document across to her. Close enough. She scanned the form. Removing Madison as beneficiary. Adding, no one. For now, I said. If I die tomorrow, let the policy lapse. I'd rather it evaporate than fill her pocket. She gave a slow nod. You sure? Positive. I handed her a second envelope. And this is the new directive. Any future attempts to change this policy require my live signature. No scans, no faxes. No voice approval. She nodded again. You're snipping the wires. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment before she added, I always liked your wife. So did I. By noon. My phone buzzed, Madison calling. I let it ring. She called again, then a text. Did you freeze the insurance? Ethan is furious. Call me back. I didn't. Instead, I walked into my storage shed and pulled out an old cardboard box. Inside were personal files, saved letters, and a sealed envelope labeled in case of death. I opened it. Inside, my original handwritten will, predating any digital filings, still valid, still mine. I slid the flower receipt inside, now marked with her name and that bold line through the dollar sign. At 4:17 p.m., someone pounded on my door, not knocked, pounded. I opened it to see Madison, no makeup. Wet hair, flushed face. You think you're clever? She spat. You think pulling your pension and rewriting the policy makes you powerful? No, I said calmly. It makes me dangerous. She looked past me into the house. You're pushing us too far. No, I said again, stepping outside, closing the door behind me. You already pushed me. I'm just finally pushing back. She crossed her arms. You'll lose the company. The family, everything. I leaned closer. You already stole those. Now I'm just taking the fuel out of your engine. You're pathetic. No, I'm awake. I held up a copy of the policy change. You know what this means? I asked. She said nothing. It means no matter what story you try to sell, if I fall down the stairs, get in a car crash, or suddenly forget who I am, you get nothing. Her eyes narrowed. You're insane. No, I whispered. I'm the one with nothing left to lose. That makes me the most sane I've ever been. She turned on her heel and stormed down the driveway. I didn't watch her go. That night, I returned to my study and took the flower bouquet wrapper, the last piece of that gift meant for my son, and folded it into an envelope. Inside, I placed a photo of him, age 9, on my shoulders, outside the first company building. Behind us, a sign that said, Legacy starts here. On the envelope, I wrote one word. Remember, then I sealed it. The next morning, I got a message from Diana. They're planning something. I overheard Madison say, we can still bury him legally. Be ready. If someone drained your accounts behind your back, would you play it safe? Or start cutting wires like I did? Let me know in the comments. Glass shattered behind me. I turned, and she was holding the photo frame. The house had never felt colder. I'd turned off the heat that morning, half out of habit, half out of instinct. Something told me the storm hadn't passed. It had only paused to reload. When I heard the key in the lock, I already knew who it was. I stood at the top of the stairs as Madison walked in without knocking, coat flaring behind her like a villain in a courtroom drama. What are you doing with my key? I asked. I still have access, she said, tossing it on the table. Technically, this house is joint marital asset property under your son's name. Not anymore, I replied. I've already filed for deed reassessment. She ignored me and walked straight to the mantel, where the only remaining photo of my wife and son stood framed beside an old brass clock. She picked it up. I stepped forward. Don't! She looked me in the eye and dropped it. The glass shattered against the hardwood floor. Picture crumpling beneath the shards. I told you, James, she hissed. You're pushing too far. Correction, I said, walking past her calmly. I'm pushing back. You just don't like how that feels. You shut off the pension. You locked us out of insurance. And now Diana's feeding you old files, I smiled. So you are listening. You're going to force our hand. You mean forge it again, I said, picking up the broken frame. Like you did with the digital transfer forms? She didn't answer. Instead, she took a deep breath. Ethan's done playing nice. He was playing? She stepped closer. You don't know what we can do, old man. Just then the doorbell rang. We both froze. I opened the door and found 2 police officers standing on the porch. One tall, serious. The other younger, nervous. Mr. James Henderson. Yes? We received a wellness concern report from a family member. They said you've been acting erratically, shouting at strangers, mismanaging finances, refusing medical care. I turned to Madison. She stood still. Innocent expression. I'm fine, I said to the officers. Would you like to come in? They hesitated. I'm lucid. I have documentation. I've been handling legal transfers and removing unauthorized access from accounts that were drained without my consent. I can show you proof. The older officer gave a slight nod. Do you mind if we ask a few questions? Standard procedure. I stepped aside. Madison sat down on the couch as if this were a tea party. One of the officers followed me to the study. The other stayed near her. I pulled out the files, bank statements, pension halt confirmations, insurance policy change. Sir, this is very organized, the officer admitted. Who claimed you were unstable? She did, I said, nodding toward the living room. Same person who filed for financial guardianship 2 days ago. The officer frowned. Did she show any court order? No, because she doesn't have one. Mind if I speak with her? Be my guest. He left. A moment later, they both returned. Mr. Henderson, the older officer said, you're under no obligation to surrender your rights. No court has ruled against your competence. If anything changes, you'll be served directly. For now, you're clear. They turned to Madison. Miss, we recommend not using wellness checks as leverage. It's a misuse of public resources. She said nothing. They left. I closed the door behind them, turned, and faced her. You sent police to declare me senile in my own home. You left us no choice. No, I said, walking past her. I left you no power. She followed me to the door. You're burning the last bridge you have. I looked at her, hand on the doorknob, then I said it, the line I'd held back for weeks. You think this war is about money, but it's not. It's about memory. And I promise you, Madison, no matter how many files you erase, I will make the world remember who I am. I opened the door. She didn't leave, so I picked up the shattered photo frame, still bleeding glass across the floor, and I dropped it in her purse. She flinched. Take that, I said. And next time you come back, bring a lawyer. That night I sat by the fire, staring at the last family photo I still had, torn but untouched. And as the clock struck midnight, my phone buzzed. Diana again. Tomorrow, meet me at the diner. Someone's ready to talk. The diner crowd went quiet the second I walked in. It's funny how betrayal echoes louder in small towns. By the time I reached Millie's diner, even the doorbell above the entrance rang differently, like it knew who I was and what I'd come for. The moment I stepped in, the crowd went quiet. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups hung mid-sip. Conversations died mid-sentence. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Polite curiosity. The kind that pretends not to stare, but never stops watching. I scanned the room and saw familiar faces. The pharmacist, the postman, even my old neighbor's daughter, who used to sell lemonade outside her dad's hardware store. Now she was whispering to her friend. Eyes locked on me. I walked toward the back booth where Diana waited. She slid a folder across the table before I even sat down. What's this? I asked. A signed witness statement, she said. From your son's former assistant. I opened it slowly. Every line was a loaded gun testimony. Confirmed knowledge of digital signature forgery. Confirmed Ethan and Madison coordinated false authorization of pension and insurance access. Confirmed removal of founder documentation was intentional, not procedural. Confirmed plan to declare James Henderson incompetent was drafted before any legal evaluation. I leaned back. This wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated. He left all this behind? I asked. Diana nodded. The assistant quit last week. Said he couldn't stomach it anymore. He's scared, but he's willing to testify. If it goes to court, I won't let him take the fall. Won't, there's more. She pulled out a second document. This one's from the town business. Registry. I scanned it. My eyes froze halfway down the page. Property. Transfer application. Henderson Commercial Block. Requested buyer. Ethan J. Henderson status. Pending intended use. Personal investment trust conversion. He's selling my block, I asked. Diana nodded grimly. He told investors the deal was clean. Used forged power of attorney papers, and no one stopped it. Not until someone challenged it. Who? She leaned in, voice barely a whisper. Phil did. He flagged it during escrow. Phil, the old banker. My only ally when the rest of the town just watched. I looked around the diner again. People were still watching. I stood up slowly and walked to the counter. Millie was wiping down mugs. She looked nervous when I approached. James, she said softly. You know me, Millie. Course I do. Then why does everyone act like I don't exist anymore? She didn't answer, so I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old founder's lounge plaque photo. Creased, worn, but still visible. This was taken right here in this town. Just outside the office that block was named after. My wife's photo hung in the entry. My name was on every lease. Millie looked at the photo. Then at me. People talk, she said. And Ethan. He's charming, polished. He made it sound like you were stepping down. Willingly, I laughed. They erased me, Millie. Bit by bit. Smiled while doing it. And when I fought back, they tried to declare me unfit. She stared at the photo, and then she said nothing. Instead, she turned to the crowded diner and shouted, Hey, folks, how many of you got your first job from this man? A few hands rose. How many of you ever walked into his office needing help? More hands. Millie held up the photo. He's not just a name on a building. He's a damn reason this town had jobs in the first place. A murmur. Then Phil stood from the booth near the jukebox. He saved my brother's mortgage in 2009. No press. No parade. Just wrote the check. The crowd began to shift like a slow tide turning toward shore. As I returned to my booth, I saw Ethan's car pull up outside. He walked in, calm, confident. Perfectly timed, like always. He saw me pause, then smiled. Dad, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Fancy seeing you here. The room stiffened. Come to stir up more gossip? No, I said, standing. I came to stop a thief. He looked around at the audience. You sure you want to make a scene? I nodded. You made it first. I'm just framing it now. As Ethan opened his mouth to respond, Diana stood and held up the assistant's signed affidavit. The diner went still again. Only this time they weren't looking at me. They were staring at him. If your own child tried to sell off your legacy behind your back, how would you stop them? Quietly or in front of the whole town? Let me know in the comments. The young lawyer looked at the paper and whispered, Oh, wow. Tuesday morning, I walked into a small law office tucked between a tire shop and a laundromat, the kind of place you only found if you weren't looking for it. But I was. Inside sat Martin Reed, late 30s, ex-corporate attorney turned private bulldog, a lawyer who'd once sued an entire homeowners association and won. Twice. He rose when I entered, sleeves already rolled up. Mr. Henderson, he said, I read the packet Diana sent me. Honestly, I thought it was fiction. No one's that stupid, I smirked. They are when they think they're the smartest ones in the room. He motioned me to sit and opened a fresh legal pad. Tell me exactly what you want. I want to shut down the property sale, freeze the transfer of company voting rights, trigger the founder clause, and make sure their next breakfast is served with a court summons. He whistled low. You're not playing chess anymore. You're flipping the board. I didn't start this war, I said, sliding over the original shareholder agreement. But I'm ending it. He looked through the document carefully. Halfway down the second page, he paused. This clause, founder retains right to reclaim executive control by presenting evidence of breach of ethics by successor party. It's still valid. Sealed, notarized, and never voided. Which means if we prove fraud, you don't just get a seat back, you get the head seat. I nodded. He stared at the signature, then whispered, Oh, wow. We worked for hours. Freezing pension accounts was step 1. This was step 2. Freezing public perception. Martin drafted an emergency injunction to halt the property sale. Then we prepped a motion to restore board privileges under breach of trust provisions. Then came the legal grenade, a cease and desist letter, addressed to Ethan and Madison personally. The final step was symbolic. We printed it all on company. Stationery, the old one, the logo they'd tried to erase. Martin handed me the sealed envelope. Hand deliver it, he said. Do it publicly. Somewhere they can't hide. That afternoon, I walked into the company headquarters again. Same glass doors, same red carpet reception. Only this time, I wasn't carrying flowers, I was carrying ammunition. Receptionist looked up and froze. I smiled politely. "Tell Mr. Henderson his father is here." She hesitated, then buzzed the intercom. "Sir, he's here." I waited. This time, Ethan came down personally, still smiling, still polished, but I could see the sweat behind his eyes. "Dad," he said, "I thought we were past this." "We're not." He motioned toward a side hallway. "Let's talk somewhere private." I shook my head. "No, let's do it here. People gathered, assistants, interns, a few managers from HR Perfect. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and held it. "Up this," I said, "is a legal injunction stopping the sale of my property, freezing any further company decisions made under your authority, and triggering my right to reclaim voting control." His smile vanished. "You can't do that," he said. "I already did." He reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. "You'll get this from a courier. Right now you're getting the message." "What message?" "That you no longer control the boardroom you betrayed." A murmur ran through the crowd. Madison appeared behind him, heels clicking like claws on tile. "James," she said, "don't do this. We can still fix this quietly." "No," I said. "You fix vandalism. You fix plumbing. But you don't fix betrayal. You burn it out." I turned to leave, but stopped, pulled one last item from my coat, the original Founders Lounge plaque photo, laminated now, cleaned and clear. I handed it to the receptionist. "Put that back up," I said, "above the entrance. Where it belongs." She looked at it with wide eyes, then nodded. I walked out, didn't look back, didn't need to. That evening Martin called. "They've received everything. Official service is done. Ethan's legal counsel already requested a delay. That means they're scared." "Good," I said. "They should be." Just before bed, I checked my email. A message from the board's independent director blinked at the top. "Let's talk. It's time we heard your side." His secretary's voice cracked. "He hasn't shown up in days." Wednesday morning, the headlines didn't whisper, they roared. "Founder files legal action against son amid allegations of corporate misconduct." "Legacy in flames, Henderson family feud goes public." The photo attached showed me outside the company doors, holding the sealed envelope like a sword in a courtroom. Ethan wasn't smiling in this one. The calls started before noon, from journalists, investors, even church elders pretending to be concerned citizens. But I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on the one thing no one else could forge: my name. I arrived back at headquarters unannounced, same receptionist, same security guard. Only this time they stood when I entered. "Is Ethan in?" I asked. She swallowed. No. He hasn't shown up in days." I blinked. "Days?" She nodded. "People are getting nervous. HR's been hush-hush. Madison's been working remotely, and there's talk." "What kind of talk?" She lowered her voice. "Investors are pulling back. That tech deal? Gone. Staff didn't get their travel reimbursements this week, and someone from the accounting department quit yesterday. Said they were tired of being asked to erase history." I stood silent for a moment, then asked, "Who's upstairs right now?" She checked her screen. "Just a few directors and 2 assistants." Perfect. I rode the elevator up to the 8th floor, executive suite, where my name once glistened on glass. Now there was nothing. Just cold steel letters. Henderson Strategic Holdings. No founder, no legacy, just corporate frostbite. As I stepped out, I heard arguing behind the boardroom door. I opened it without knocking. 2 directors turned. One flinched like I was a ghost. The third stood up. "James," she said, "we were just discussing you." "Discuss away," I said, "but do it with the facts." I dropped the latest affidavit onto the table. Another signed witness, a former junior partner in the legal team, now admitting Madison had instructed them to revise paperwork for family control transfer. Legal fraud. Financial manipulation. "And now investor abandonment," I said. "This isn't just family drama, it's fiduciary crisis." One director cleared his throat. We're preparing to vote on an emergency reinstatement hearing. The clause you triggered, it's real. And powerful." "I know," I said. "Symbolic object." I slid across the table the laminated Founders Lounge plaque photo again. Just in case anyone forgot whose hands built this. Back downstairs, the receptionist waved me over. "There's someone here to see you." It was Thomas, the building's janitor. Grey hair, rough hands. The man who once told me, "You used to run this floor." He handed me an envelope. This was dropped at the front desk. No name, but I figured it was meant for you. I opened it. Inside, a final invoice from the private contractor who had removed the founder's lounge nameplate weeks ago, scrawled in handwriting across the bottom. Paid in full by Madison Grace. Expedited same day. Instructions: destroy original plaque. Confidential. But the plaque had never been destroyed. Thomas had kept it. "That plaque still in your closet?" I asked. He grinned. "You bet. Figured it didn't feel right to trash a man's name." I clapped him on the shoulder. "Hang on to it. We'll need it soon." That afternoon, news broke of the withdrawal of the Bennett merger. The big tech deal Ethan had promised would elevate the company into the next generation. Instead, it pulled the rug. Stocks dipped. Emails flew. HR cancelled 3 corporate retreats. An email from Madison leaked, showing her calling the founder clause an outdated paper tiger. That tiger had claws, and the press was circling. One op-ed from a former board member ended with, "A company that forgets its roots deserves the cracks it now walks on." I returned home late that night, exhausted but not broken. I lit a fire. Sat on the couch, pulled out the framed photo Ethan had shattered days ago. Only this time, I didn't look at the glass. I looked at the boy sitting on my shoulders in the picture, smiling at a world he thought he'd one day inherit. That smile had become a mask, but underneath, he was still my son. And tomorrow I'd take back more than my name. I'd take back the legacy he thought he could own without earning it. The next morning, I received a call from the board's legal team. "Mr. Henderson, the vote is scheduled. You'll be speaking in front of the entire leadership team, Friday morning. We suggest you come prepared." Pastor cleared his throat. "We have a testimony today." The church had never felt more like a courtroom. It was Sunday again. A full week since I stood at that same pulpit and exposed the paper-thin lies that had wrapped around my legacy like vines. Only this time, I wasn't asked to speak. I was invited by the pastor himself. "Mr. James Henderson," he'd said, calling Saturday night, voice heavy with quiet remorse. "You built more than a company. You built this community. And people need to hear your truth. All of it." So I came, wore my wife's favorite navy blazer, slid the original founder's plaque into a folder, and carried the faded bouquet wrapper I'd been keeping in my coat since the day Ethan locked me out. I didn't walk in like a broken man. I walked in like a father with unfinished business. The sanctuary was packed. Word had gotten around. Half the business district sat near the front. Bankers, realtors, former employees. Even the old mayor, now retired, leaned against a cane in the aisle. I scanned the pews and saw her, Madison, sitting perfectly still, hands folded like a choir girl. But her eyes were glass, unblinking, strategic. Ethan sat beside her, lips pressed tight. So immaculate, but his fingers wouldn't stop twitching. They were unraveling, and I was the string. Midway through the service, Pastor Grant cleared his throat. "Before we close, we have a testimony. A man many of you know, some of you think you still know. But what we often forget is that dignity, once lost, can still be reclaimed." He turned to me. "Mr. Henderson." I rose, walked to the front. The room, once filled with sacred hums, now buzzed with a silence far heavier. I took the pulpit, didn't speak right away, just opened the folder, pulled out the Founder's Lounge photo, the one Madison tried to erase, the one Thomas saved from a trash order she paid for in cash. I held it up. "This was once mounted outside the office you now call Henderson Strategic Holdings." That plaque stayed there for 18 years. Then one morning it was gone. I turned the photo around so the crowd could see. Not broken, not stolen, removed quietly without ceremony. Just like the man who built it. I paused, saw heads lower, a few mouths tightened. I reached for the second item, the bouquet wrapper, now faded, still bearing the smudged name tag I wrote for Ethan. "Last month I brought flowers to my son's office. Not for an occasion, just because I was proud." I never made it past the lobby. A murmur ran through the rows. He told the guard I was poor, said I wasn't to be let in. That was my thank you after 40 years of sacrifice. I laid the wrapper beside the photo, then pulled out the affidavit, the smoking gun. The assistant signed statement. Witness to everything: forgery, digital theft, the planned guardianship scheme. I handed it to Pastor Grant. Not for show. For record. He took it silent, his face drained. I looked at the congregation. I don't ask for pity. I ask for clarity. I looked at Ethan. You wanted to erase me so badly, son. But even in your cleanest cuts, you left fingerprints. He looked down. Madison sat frozen, jaw clenched. I turned back to the church. I gave my son a name. He tried to sell it. I gave my daughter-in-law trust. She traded it for control. And when I pushed back, they didn't apologize. They tried to declare me insane. A collective gasp filled the room. I pointed at Madison. She filed a guardianship petition, said I was mentally unfit. Days after draining my pension, days after changing my insurance to her name, she stood. Don't you dare lie in a church, James. I didn't move. The room held its breath. You want to speak? I asked. You can have the mic after me. But only if you come up here and admit what you did. She didn't. Ethan stood now too, pulling her gently back into the pew. He knew this wasn't a battle anymore. This was a burial. Not of me. Of the mask they'd worn too long. Pastor Grant stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, then turned to the congregation. This church believes in redemption, but redemption doesn't come without truth. And truth has just spoken. As I walked back down the aisle, someone clapped, then another, until the church echoed not with hymns but with applause, not for a speech, but for the man they'd forgotten to stand beside. Until now, I stood outside the office, envelope in hand, just like day one. Thursday morning, I stood on the same marble steps I'd helped fund 2 decades ago. The brass doors still gleamed. The building still carried my last name. But today it was going to carry my voice again. I held the envelope tight. Not flowers this time. Court documents, filed, stamped, legal fire. Inside, full injunction confirmation, court order of reinstatement, freeze on all executive decisions made after my removal, and formal reactivation of the Founders Clause, granting immediate majority control. Martin, my lawyer, walked beside me. Tie loosened, grin cocked like a man who knew we'd already won. You ready for this? He asked. I nodded. I was born ready. They just forgot. Security didn't stop us. Reception didn't speak. We took the elevator straight to the 8th floor, executive boardroom, where the final vote was about to begin. Inside, the entire leadership team, seated. At the head, Ethan, hair slicked back, jaw tight, trying to hide the shaking in his hand. Madison sat beside him, lips drawn into a line so sharp it could cut glass. Bored. Members turned as I entered. Some stood, some didn't, but all watched. I walked to the head of the table, not beside Ethan, opposite him, and placed the sealed court envelope directly in front of the chairman. This is not a request, I said. It's a restoration. He opened it. Read silently. His eyebrows lifted halfway through, and by the end his hand was visibly trembling. Everything's in order, he said. Effective immediately. Mr. James Henderson is reinstated with full controlling interest under the Founders Protection Clause. All executive decisions post-removal are void until reviewed. Ethan jumped from his chair. You can't do this. This is my company now. No, I said. It was mine. You just borrowed it while I grieved your mother. You were supposed to pass it down. I was, I said, cold and clear. Until you tried to steal it. Madison stood. You'll ruin the press momentum, the investors. They're already gone, I snapped. You burned the bridge. I just built the exit. I reached into my coat and pulled out a second envelope. This one wasn't legal, it was personal. Inside, a printed press release with the company's new mission statement, written by me, signed that morning. The title, Restoring Honor, a new chapter from the true founder of Henderson Strategic. Below it, the first line read, We rise again not by hiding the past, but by owning it. I handed copies to the board. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice cracked. This is vindictive. No, I said. This is righteous. I turned to the chairman. Schedule a staff-wide announcement. I'll deliver it myself in the atrium. Noon. Then before I walked out, I gave Ethan the final blow. I'm not firing you. He looked surprised. I'm demoting you. Effective immediately. You'll serve as head of community partnerships. You'll answer phones, arrange donations, and listen to every family you ignored. You can't. I already did. I looked at Madison. You're not so lucky. Her eyes narrowed. You forged documents Tampered with legal records. That's not demotion, that's criminal. You wouldn't dare— I'm not daring anything, I said, sliding her termination letter across the table. I'm delivering. At noon I stood at the second-floor balcony, looking down at the gathered staff, old faces. New faces. Unsure faces. I held up the Founders Lounge plaque, restored to full shine. This company was built on sacrifice. And it lost its soul-chasing shortcuts. I turned it around. My name isn't just etched in steel. It's etched in every long night, every paycheck I signed, every job I saved. I walked down the stairs and mounted the plaque back on the wall. Symbolic object, returned to its rightful place. The crowd applauded. Not thunder, but truth. And Ethan? He watched from the side, shirt untucked, eyes rimmed red, hands limp at his sides. He didn't speak because he couldn't. Not anymore. That evening, as I sat in my office again, I opened one last message. A charity request from a veterans shelter. I smiled, reached into my drawer. Hand pulled out a check already made out, from the Founders account. Signed, sealed, mine again. He waited in the rain for 3 hours before I opened the door. It was pouring that Friday evening. The kind of rain that drowns noise and memory alike. I almost didn't notice him. I was reading in the den, firelight flickering across the edge of my coffee table. When the second knock came, the first had been timid. The second was desperate. When I opened the door, Ethan stood on the porch, drenched from head to toe. No umbrella, no coat, just a man stripped down to his mistakes. 3 hours, he muttered, eyes hollow. I waited 3 hours. I didn't move, didn't say a word. He looked down, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, shaking. I signed the resignation form, he said. All of it, official, legal. I've forfeited my stake, my voting rights. Everything. I didn't ask you to do that, I said. You didn't have to, he replied. I let him inside, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to see whether there was anything left of the boy I once raised. He stood awkwardly near the fireplace, eyes locked on the framed family photo that had somehow survived Madison's rampage. She's gone, he said after a long silence. Left yesterday. Took what she could. Said I was useless without the name. I poured him a glass of water. Didn't offer anything warmer. I wanted to be better than you, he confessed, voice barely audible. Not because you were bad, but because you were so damn good it scared me. I thought if I could build bigger, move faster. Maybe I'd matter more. I sat down. You mattered the moment you were born. You just forgot. He flinched, looked away, then pulled something from his other pocket. A photo. The same one I'd seen shattered weeks ago, but reprinted, reframed. This time clean, scented. He placed it on the table. I had this remade, he said. I found the original in an old email your assistant forwarded years ago. I thought you might want it. I looked at it. The three of us, me, my wife and a young Ethan with braces, mid-laugh, sitting on my shoulders. A ghost of simpler days. You can't undo what you did, I said softly. This isn't about plaques or pensions. It's about trust. And you turned it into currency. I know, he knelt a grown man on his knees. I'm not asking for a title or a job. I just want a second chance. Not at the company, at being your son. I let the silence stretch. Then I reached for the checkbook on my desk. He looked confused. Stand up, I said. He did. I handed him a sealed envelope. What is this? He asked. A letter of recommendation, I said, for a position at Veterans Forward. Non-profit. They need someone to coordinate housing and logistics. It's not glamorous, but it's real. He stared at the envelope. I'm not sending you there to exile you, I said. I'm sending you to remember what it means to serve before you lead. His voice cracked. You still believe in me? I stood, walked past him, then turned back. No, I said. I believe you can become someone worth believing in. He left. Without another word, didn't try to hug. Me didn't beg again, just nodded and walked. Back into the rain with the envelope tucked under his arm like something sacred. An hour later, I opened my study drawer. Inside sat the final symbolic object, the flower bouquet wrapper still smudged, still stained. I unfolded it, wrote one word on the back, returned. That Sunday, the diner waitress slipped me a note. He came in yesterday, she said. Helped bus tables. Told folks to stop calling you names. The town was watching again, but this time, it was him who was defending me. At the retirement gala, my name echoed louder than any applause. The lights in the town hall weren't built for flashbulbs, but that night, they might as well have been spotlights. The founder's retirement gala was standing room only. Not because people were required to come, but because they chose to. Not out of guilt, out of respect. Some faces I knew, some I hadn't seen in years. Former employees, families I'd helped through layoffs, kids who were now business owners themselves. There was no red carpet, but there was a table, and on that table sat a fresh bouquet of red and white roses, placed by someone before I arrived. Attached to it, a folded piece of the original bouquet wrapper I'd once carried, on the back scribbled in ink, "For what you built, and what you never let die." No name, but I knew. Pastor Grant stepped onto the stage and tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we don't celebrate a business. We celebrate a backbone." The room clapped, but when he said my name, James Henderson, the clapping didn't stop. It rose. The janitor stood. First, then the bank manager, then Millie from the diner, then the church deacon, and before I even reached the stage, the whole damn town was on its feet, applauding. A man they once whispered about, a man they'd watched fall and rise again. I walked to the podium, slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because I wanted to feel every step of the journey that brought me back. Here every scar mattered now, not one was wasted. "Won't speak long," I said. Not because I'm tired, but because I've already said what needed saying. The crowd chuckled gently, then quieted. I held up a framed photo, the plaque that had once hung outside my company's doors, now restored, and below it, I held up something new. A custom wooden plaque engraved that morning. Founder's Legacy Scholarship, in honor of Margaret Henderson. "My wife, my reason, my center," the crowd murmured, then went still. "I was betrayed," I said. "But betrayal doesn't kill legacy. Silence does." And I refused to go silent. The room erupted, but I wasn't done. I looked to the back of the hall where Ethan stood, not dressed in a suit, but a simple button-down shirt. Sleeves rolled, no tie, no title, just a man trying to rebuild and standing beside him. The head of the veterans' non-profit, already smiling, already proud. The same woman I'd once helped save from foreclosure during the 2009 collapse. She had no idea then that the boy I'd give her now was the one who once stole everything from me. After the speeches, the crowd mingled. Ethan approached slowly. This time, he didn't speak first, I did. "Who brought the flowers?" He nodded. "Me." "You remembered the wrapper?" He nodded again. "I thought you'd throw it away." "I almost did," he admitted, "but I kept it. Carried it in my glove box for a week. Wasn't sure why. You know now?" "Yes," he said, voice firm. "Because I needed to return what I never earned." I looked him over. "No excuses, no defenses, just truth. So I did something I never planned to do. I reached into my coat and pulled out a key, not to the office, but to my old truck, the one he learned to drive in, the one we used to haul lumber to the first office site. "It's parked outside," I said. "It still runs." His voice cracked. "Why give me this?" "Because redemption doesn't need a boardroom," I replied. "It needs a starting line." He took the key and held it like it meant something, because this time it did. Later that night, I returned to the office, just me and the Founders Lounge, restored in full. I placed a fresh flower in the lobby vase, single red rose, no fanfare, no crowd, just a quiet symbol that the man they tried to erase was still here and always would be. Outside, someone tapped me on the shoulder. The janitor again. Same grin, same mop. "They're calling it the Henderson Rebuild," he said. "Even the new hires know your story now." I smiled, turned to the lobby window, and for the first time in months I saw my reflection again. Not the man they tried to replace, but the father who refused to be forgotten. "Has anyone ever tried to erase your name?" "Only for the world to write it back louder." Share your story in the comments. And remember, real legacy can't be stolen, only restored.